Welcome to the October edition of the Cinetopia radio show and podcast. I'm Amanda, your host, and on this edition, show co-producer Jim Ross and show regular Simon Bowie reviewed films from the London Film Festival, including Emerald Fennel's Saltburn, as well as Martin Scorsese's Killer of the Flower Moon, as well as the film EILEEN, directed by William Oldroyd. I also sat down with Paul Bruce, director of the Edinburgh Short Film Festival, and Jamie Robson, an actor who features in 2 films as part of the festival. All on this show, so stay tuned. So, Cinetopia has a few exciting events to announce. Firstly, we'd like to mention that we're running our networking events as part of the Edinburgh Short Film Festival opening night. That's the 26th of October, which we've already shared on our social media. But if you haven't seen that, please join us. If you haven't even RSVP'd, that's totally fine. Just come to Summer Hall. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that in the show. Next, and a really exciting one for us, we are bringing back our Cinetopia Doc Club on a regular basis and now at the Cameo Cinema, which we're super excited about. And the first event and film we're going to be showing is Paul Sung's Tish. So Cinetopia Doc presents a preview screening of Paul Sung's latest film, Tish, which is a moving portrait of social documentary photographer and trailblazer Tish Martha, who dedicated her life to documenting the lives of working class communities in Northeast England. And we will show the film on the 2nd of November at times to be determined, but around 6 p.m. It'll be followed by a Q&A with the director, Paul, and additional time afterwards for discussion and networking at the Cameo Bar. This project is funded by the Film Hub Scotland and also the Scottish Documentary Institute. It's a project we've been working on for years. We've come in and out. We did it during the pandemic. We did it at Summer Hall, but we're super excited to be working with Cameo with this and very excited. So it'll be continuing on a monthly basis going forward, and we really hope that you come to this. Finally, we would like to mention Rocky Horror Picture Show, which we announced earlier a couple weeks ago. We're doing that at the Voodoo Rooms like we did with Pretty in Pink. So that is a costume celebration and party. And there's more information about that, but we're also doing that with our friends Pastel Black. So it's a bit of showing up, having fun, and celebrating Halloween. So that's the 31st of October. So please come to that as well. So all of you can check all of that out on cinetopia.co.uk. So we're here this month, and right now I'm here with Jim and Simon, regulars on the podcast and show. You both saw certain films from the London Film Festival in different ways, so I thought we would just sort of talk about those experiences, one actually being in London and one seeing it sort of through the satellite screenings in Glasgow. So how has the London Film Festival been for the both of you so far?
So yeah, I've seen a couple of films at the Glasgow Film Theatre, which is, I talked about it on this podcast, on this show before, but great cinema, wonderful place in Glasgow. Would be very sorry to lose it if anything happened to it. But it was great. Sort of packed out screening for Saltburn, which we'll discuss, and not quite as busy screening for EILEEN, but still a lot of buzz around the London Film Festival satellite screenings that are going on there. For me, I don't think the satellite screenings have been as good as last year. There's not quite the same selection of films for me, but maybe I'm just thinking about some specific London Film Festival films that I'm disappointed haven't come to satellite places around the UK. I'm thinking
what have you got in mind there?
The Zone of Interest, Jonathan Glazer's new film, which I desperately want to see, and The Killer, the David Fincher film.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you got a point there. Actually, it's a little like when I looked at the program that was going out to like the satellite locations. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of good films in amongst there, right?
Oh yeah.
But it was slightly disappointing. Like, because it was London. I've got to get this right in my head, but I'm pretty sure it was London Film Festival in 2019 where I saw The Irishman, which of course would spend most of its life on Netflix. I saw The Irishman at Dundee Contemporary Arts, right? That was part of it. That was part of that remote screen. And I feel like there's a few where they have been held back for London itself.
It feels like it. I'm thinking of last year where I got to see The Banshees of Inisherin,
Yeah.
Triangle of Sadness, and Glass Onion, the Knives Out film, all at London Film Festival satellite screenings, and it just doesn't feel like it's the same. I don't know. I don't want to say caliber because that's a loaded term, but it doesn't feel like the same range of films has come to satellite cinemas this time around.
I think it's maybe just kind of a function of a lot of festivals like London, let's say, kind of getting back to post-pandemic. It's post-pandemic as we are, right? But post-pandemic normality almost, because even the online. So I actually went to press screenings in London, right? Because as we've said, I live in the shadow of Mordor now. And I had press accreditation, and even the online viewing library is a lot stripped back compared to how it was in previous years. And it's quite interesting, actually, in the sense that there was still plenty on there, but it was mostly the shorts program, right? There are features on there, like there was Michael Winterbottom's new one, Girl, which we reviewed as part of the Glasgow Film Festival. That's screening at London Film Festival. That's on the online viewing library. And I think it got did it get satellite screenings as well? I can't remember. Anyway,
I can't remember.
Not it would matter for Glasgow anyway, because Glasgow
I saw it at Glasgow,
ago,
so
right?
I didn't pay attention to it.
But it doesn't have a lot on it, even compared to actual pre-pandemic online viewing live streaming. So it just feels like kind of like access and sharing of that sort of program is getting a bit locked down now anyway. And I don't really know what to make of that, because obviously you need to have a balance between it being a film festival associated with a particular place and kind of sharing the cinematic wealth as it were, right? But I think it's particularly important in the UK context because of all the pressures that we're seeing on the likes of the film house and all these cinemas closing, film festivals under pressure, and the fact that so much goes to London. I mean, you couldn't possibly see everything there, and there are films there's films at this festival I really wanted to see, which, through a combination of my own schedule and just kind of, there being so much I'm not being able to see. Like, I want to see Fingernails, which is Christos Niku's follow-up to Apples, which we reviewed on the show, which I'm really looking forward to seeing. I want to see Starve Acre, where that's the second film from Daniel Kokotalio, who did Apostasy a number of years ago, which is another film I thought was excellent. So, I see why. I think it's a bit unfortunate, and I think it's actually kind of going back to what even worse than it maybe was pre-pandemic in terms of how much people outside London can see these films, right? And not everybody's in a position where they've been able to go to Cannes or Venice to see some of these things that the other ones that they'll get, So it's definitely good. I mean, it's better the satellite screens have things and they don't, but
it's great to have
I'd
satellite.
like to have seen a bit more.
Yeah, it's great to have satellite screenings, and I take your point about the sense of place of a film festival, and this being the London Film Festival, but it is also the BFI London Film Festival, with the B standing for British, and it's somewhat disappointing that it's not more spread around the UK, and that there's not more of a national feel to it, And I could criticize the BFI for its support of regional cinemas outside London, but that's a discussion for another time.
One argument I would say in that is, there are other film festivals that perhaps would be able to get some of these films that London gets. London gets it because it's London Film Festival, it's BFI London Film Festival. But for example, I mean, I know, Jim, Cambridge quite well, but perhaps like Cambridge would then want to get a film that would have been part of, something like the London Film Festival, or those shortly after. You just mentioned Glasgow. Perhaps they would want to get those films as well and share them as part of their own festival as well. So it's just maybe a thought of why they might be holding back some versus others, like the ones that are about to come out, like the big ones seem to be, I don't know that.
Well, I mean, like the example I'll give actually is one of the films that I'll talk about briefly, because it was one of the ones that I saw. It's going to come out shortly after the podcast. It's Scorsese's new one, right? The Killers of the Flower Moon. Now, it will get a theatrical release. I think it's attached to Apple TV Plus, so I think it'll probably kind of go on to that probably at some point after that. And I think it's been distributed by Paramount for the theatrical release. But like, for instance, I don't really see why that couldn't have had a satellite screening, and that would have been, that's a big film. One night, it's going to come out a week later, sure, but like if it's on for one night, I don't think that's going to impact kind of the local box office hugely. It would create a buzz around it, and I think like one of the things that we appreciate about film festivals as a group here, I think, and one of the things that we kind of always want to have is that it is that kind of sense of buzz, of like community around cinema, everybody engaging with it and enjoying it and being excited about it and wanting to go to the cinema. So to me, some of these films that have not had satellite screenings feel like a bit of a miss to me, that one I consider a little bit odd, but
especially in the hyper local context of Glasgow, the GFT has been doing Scorsese screenings every month for like the past year as part of a Scorsese season. So adding Killers of the Flower Moon are the kind of special, like
the crescendo of that entire
would have been great.
So yeah, that's really like and Amanda, your point's perfectly valid, right? Because there are some films here where I fully expect they will certainly come to film festivals like Cambridge. I mean, some of them are coming to Cambridge, right? Because I've seen the programme and plan to take one's coverage of it right now. A couple of the films I've spoken about will be at Cambridge, right? So in that makes sense. But for these bigger films that are coming out like quite soon, like I think like the Andrew High film, I think All of Us Strangers, did it get a satellite screening?
It did. I unfortunately couldn't make it, but I
don't really see why. Like, why would you give that? And I'm not saying they should have had a satellite screening. That's an example where I do think it should have had a satellite screening, but I don't really see why that got one, others didn't. Other than like trying to retain some glamour for London, I'm like, well, you've got the red carpet, you've got your, all that. That's all still there, right? And I think Simon's point about it being. I mean, it is like that's the official title of it, the BFI London Film Festival, right? It's not like smaller festivals in the city like London Short Film Festival. It's London Short Film Festival, and because of where it is, it will probably get quite a lot of shorts for UK premieres and things like that. But this isn't. This is the BFI London Film Festival, and the place I went to see Killers of the Flower Moon was the National Film Theatre one, right? So in that sense, I do feel maybe a little bit more could have been done to create a national buzz around cinema, if I'm being honest, right? And I think they had some of the films to achieve that. I think the Scorsese one is a case in point, right? But
also on that front, I mean, I remember the first time I went to the Cameo, I saw a film, I think it was like a Beatles film, a documentary, and they had sort of the red carpet streaming, and it was sort of exciting to go see like this live thing. And I know Scorsese and Greta Gerwig, they were all sort of there, so potentially that could have been a nice sort of element where they brought that conversation they had. I mean, I know that eventually it went online as well, but Scorsese had come and talked at that. Were you at the screening where Scorsese was at? Or no?
No. I think I've got to get my timings right here. I'm pretty sure his talk started in another part of the building while I was watching the film. I think it was on the same day. No. But I was doing my thing where so the film is like, well, when we talk about it, it's 3.5 hours long. So basically, I needed to watch it and then I needed to hop onto a train to get back home, pick my daughter up before her nursery shut, because it was a proper chunky film. But yeah, they did some stuff around that with The Irishman when that did, like, they broadcast kind of like interviews and red carpet stuff. It was like a build up to kind of the film, and they did it in cinemas. I will be honest, I didn't care for it much, but like I can see how it adds to the sense of occasion. Some people who were in the DCA with me were clearly kind of engaged with it. But yeah, it's just stuff like that. It's not really. I feel like there's been less of that, like which is a little disappointing. I think that the zone of interest is another one, right? I mean, if you do one screening of that, is it really going to impact the local box office that much when it does actually come about? And yeah.
I think the thought of having kind of festivals not only is about this buzz, but it's also about this live element to it. And so if you can bring that live element, then it might make it a slightly different than just a regular box office. But my guess would be also sometimes it's about the deals being made with these big films. So like if T will make a deal with the distributor for the new Scorsese, and it might be a more profitable deal than they would have made with London Film Festival, which might have offered just a certain deal or something like that. So I just wonder if it's a little bit about saving those things for other reasons.
I think you're probably right. This is a layered and complex set of legal contracts underpinning this in the background, right? It's not like I'm saying, yes, create excitement about cinema, but unfortunately there's a lot of bean counting and such that, where that's not the primary goal. So no, you're probably, you're 100% right. It's undoubtedly something that we don't really have the full grasp of, I would have thought.
And I don't want to be too negative about the satellite screenings. There are some good films on there that I didn't have the opportunity to see, and that's just down to my circumstances. So the new Todd Haynes, May December, the new Kitty Green, The Royal Hotel, the Andrew Hay film you've already talked about, How to Have Sex, 20,000 Species of Bees. There's a lot of good films that I haven't had the chance to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I would have actually, speaking of the opening film, I think it was Saltburn, and you saw it. I would have just absolutely loved to go see it if it had been at Edinburgh. I think it was just a little bit for me and sort of, the cost and trains and whatnot to get myself to Glasgow. But yeah, so I'm curious about what you thought about that film and that experience of seeing it in Glasgow at the same night as it was premiering in London.
Yeah, like I say, this was the busiest screening I went to at the London Film Festival satellite screenings. It was sold out. The GFT one was absolutely full, and it seemed like there was a lot of anticipation for it. People looking forward to seeing Emerald Fennell's new film. This is the follow-up to her debut, Promising Young Woman, which we talked about on the show, as I recall, and I really enjoyed. I thought it was a very strong debut, so I was excited to see Saltburn. Shall I get into it? Shall I give a brief overview? So Saltburn follows Oliver Quick, who is played by Barry Keoghan. He's the kind of token working class student in his college, Oxford University. He's got into Oxford through his being intelligent rather than Byzantine systems of privilege. But that means that his classmates from wealthy families all look down on him. He doesn't really he makes one friend who's a kind of also a social outcast. But we follow these kind of social complexities of Oliver as he tries to navigate his time at Oxford. His social fortunes turn around when he befriends a charismatic posho called Felix, played by Jacob Elordi, who invites Oliver to spend the summer at his family estate, Saltburn. And at this palatial estate, it's this huge mansion where you can easily get lost. And there's only like 7 people staying there, but this is how the other side live. And Oliver is exposed to this way of life that he's never experienced before. But there's this creepy sense of who actually has the power here. Is it the aristocratic British family, or is it working class Oliver, who may have his own agenda? And there's kind of a sneaky reversal of power dynamics as the film goes on. So I really liked the start of the film. I think it starts strong at Oxford, capturing these social complexities of British universities and obviously setting out its stall for satirizing British class structures in the way that Promising Young Woman kind of satirized toxic men and toxic nice guys and the kind of dynamics of male privilege and sexual assault. This is clearly aiming at British class and the upper class specifically. I just the problem with the film for me is that it fumbles satirizing those British class dynamics, and in a way that undermines the entire film. It's a very entertaining film, but its treatment of class is very broad at points and doesn't have the kind of incisiveness that I felt Promising Young Woman had towards a certain species of nice guy man. So there's kind of broad caricatures. Rosamund Pike and Richard E. Grant play the kind of mother and father, the posh mother and father, and they're very good. They're very entertaining. Richard E. Grant is having a whale of a time, but the caricature that he is playing is becomes far too broad, and it makes it difficult to buy into the satire that the film needs for the root of what it's trying to say, for its themes. There's also an intersection with race. So Farley is a character played by Archie Madekwe. He is Felix's cousin, and he is an American black man who is also at Oxford and is related to the family. And so there's this complex question of how he relates to the family's, embedded in the family's privilege, but also in being black is not able to enter this world of whiteness completely. And that's alluded to, but it's never really explored in any depth. And it kind of underserves that character and underserves the entire theme about satirizing British class and the complexities of it. So for me, the film wasn't entirely successful. Like I say, it's very entertaining and I had great fun with it. In terms of pacing, the pacing is quite uneven. It spends a lot of time building up, and then the kind of denouement, the ending, is very rushed in a very inelegant way. But I had fun with it, and there's some great performances. Barry Keoghan is terrific. I mentioned the Banshees of Inisherin. He's gets a lot more to work with in this and pulls it off very well. Jacob Elordi is very good, kind of grounding this poshness in a person who seems believable and yet is a satiric representation of this kind of Oxford poshness. And it looks great. The film is shot in this claustrophobic aspect ratio that kind of mirrors the claustrophobia that Oliver feels in this strange environment. But it doesn't work for me in the same way that Promising Young Woman worked, and I was ultimately kind of disappointed by that.
Yeah, no, that's a really great early review of a film that I'm really excited to see, and yeah, because I loved Promising Young Woman a lot as well. It still kind of makes me excited to see it. Just some of the things you've been talking about.
Absolutely, so I would say go see it. I think it's, as like I say, it's very entertaining. It's often very funny, very black comedy in the same way that Promising Young Woman was at times, but also with this kind of psychological thriller edge behind it. And there's some very funny visual gags, kind of speaking to the satire of British class. It just doesn't handle it in the complex way that it needs to be handled for the themes to really land.
Yeah, and it comes out actually November 17th. It's really great to hear, and yeah, hopefully lots of people will see it and in their cinemas near them. So, Jim, you saw another big film that London Film Festival got, the new Scorsese film that we were briefly alluding to. And I know you're a big Scorsese fan, but how did you enjoy that film? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Killers of the Flower Moon, which is based upon a investigative book of the same name, and basically what it is it's a dramatization of the Osage Indian murders, which was basically a series of murders that span quite a long period of time. That kind of through the 1910s through to kind of the late 2020s, maybe in the 1930s, which basically all kind of centered around trying to move the oil rights that the Osage Indian nation found itself in control of towards white people. And basically what we're following here is we are primarily with Leonardo DiCaprio's Ernest Burkhart, who is the nephew of Robert De Niro, William Hale, who's known as King and King of the Osage Mountains. And basically then it kind of focuses on the way that this Indian nation, the Native Americans of the region, are manipulated by white people who clearly don't feel like they deserve the wealth that they've gotten. And Ernest, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, basically falls for and is by all accounts, is in love with Molly, who's Lily Gladstone, played by Lily Gladstone. And basically it kind of chronicles how Robert De Niro's William Hale is, he presents himself as this friend of the Osage and, helps to provide them with things and is a true friend and ally of theirs, but he's not. He's undermining them at every point, and basically he is pulling a lot of strings in the background to try and get these oil rights to move to Molly, and thus his nephew Ernest, and how he takes advantage of them. I'll kind of leave it there for a plot synopsis, because a lot happens in this film. It is very epic in scope. It is nearly 3.5 hours long. I think it comes in slightly shorter than The Irishman. I honestly thought this was superb. I really did think it was excellent. The first thing to note is the acting performances are engaging and committed and just excellent. It's fantastic to see DiCaprio and De Niro, kind of like the two Scorsese muses of recent years and decades, I suppose, together. And they're playing roles that I think are quite different to roles that they've played with Scorsese before, right? Leonardo DiCaprio's Ernest is quite a kind of simple, easily manipulated man. He's not maybe the sharpest knife in the drawer, whereas De Niro's William Hale is kind of I don't want to say quiet, but very purposeful and deliberate and premeditated man, right? You're not seeing a lot of the the violent outbursts you might have seen in some of the more kind of like mob or gangster associated roles he's had. We're certainly a very long way from the likes of Cape Fear here. So that's interesting of itself. The standout is definitely Lily Gladstone, though, right? Who plays Molly, Ernest's Native American wife. And basically it just the layers of kind of manipulation and betrayal and arrogance that the white people in this film demonstrate in relation to kind of the good fortune that the Osage have found themselves in is just put across superbly. And I think this layering, it's almost kind of, you've got the two main things of kind of like William Hale and how he exerts his power, right? And the kind of insidious way he goes about it. And then you've got, on the other side of this, you've got Ernest, his nephew, and basically how he is kind of slowly corrupted and manipulated by this. He's certainly not presented as kind of like, a good man who fell, or it's not that sort of picture, but it's just this it does show how kind of like, to a certain extent, everybody, everybody who is white in this film is complicit in some way, right? And basically some more so than others, but they're all falling to the same systemic issues that are put across superbly in the film. I think the score is also excellent, done by Robbie Robertson, who's part of the band, who is of course profiled by Scorsese quite extensively. It is 3.5 hours long. I didn't feel a second of it, and that's another testament to Thelma Schoonmaker. Okay, Scorsese's longtime collaborator, and I think she's as much responsible for the likes of this film and The Irishman and others working as Scorsese is in a lot of cases. It really is superb. Now I don't really know what else to put across. Other than that, it layers in so many things about what I've already said, and it even finds time at the end to even Scorsese finds time at the end to even kind of question his own role in telling this story, right? And I won't put across how, because it's actually quite an interesting moment, but it is actually kind of looking at is he also complicit in kind of going over this tale in such detail? Are we complicit in wanting to consume these sort of kind of tales of true crime, and do we engage properly with the impact it had on the people, right? Or is that in and of itself exploitative? It even finds time to kind of weave that in at the end, and these clashing ideas of kind of this weird mixture that Ernest has of actually loving and wanting to be protective of his wife and children, but also kind of that greed which is there and is then kind of fed by his uncle. And there's all sorts of little racist microaggressions throughout the film that are put in there that really kind of put a very subtle texture on the entire kind of picture of this oil rights drama. Effectively is kind of what actually kind of underscores it. There's slurs here, there's the KKK are kind of there just very briefly in an almost throwaway thing, just to show how the fabric of this society is unequal. And the fact that the Osage have found themselves with so much money is an affront to what many see in the film as kind of the natural order, and what they will do to reestablish that, right? What are the terrible, insidious things that they will do, right? It's kind of a roll call of recent kind of Scorsese collaborators as well. Like Jesse Plemons shows up for kind of the home run of the film as an FBI investigator, which also speaks to kind of the interesting place that this sits in American history, right? Because the book is based on is actually called Killers of the Flower Moon, the Osage Murders, and the Birth of the FBI, right? Because the FBI at the time this was happening was a completely kind of new concept as federal. Even when Jesse Plemons introduced himself, he said it's called the Bureau of Investigation, right? The idea of it being the FBI is not an established thing. So it's fascinating from kind of just a story and an acting standpoint. It's fascinating from what Scorsese puts across about American society then and even now, and how certain aspects of that's still being reflected now, and even just kind of where it sits in American history. I think it's a superb film, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend anybody going to see it. I'm trying to write a review of it right now, which will hopefully come out around about the time that we're broadcasting this, and trying to unpick all the various things about it is quite the task, right? Because there's a lot of layers to this. I could be picking over this for ages, and I could be picking over the likes of Lily Gladstone's performance for ages. I think her performance is absolutely superb. I couldn't recommend it enough.
Just to get a sense of the film, I haven't seen it. I can't wait to see it. But just to get a sense of it, is there another Scorsese film that you would say it's close to in terms of tone or themes?
There's a tone or themes. It's a good question. There is. So I picked. So when we did the show, which was at the end of 2020 on Cinetopia, and we picked, as both of you know through different mediums, right? I hate needing to pick and rank things and kind of making lists or something, but I picked The Irishman as one of my films of the decade. I think this is better than The Irishman. I think it. Now I think in terms of the scope and the length of it, right, it kind of reminds me of The Irishman, right, because of how much ground we cover in terms of the lives of these characters, right? We cover multiple years, right? This is not kind of this isn't really a snapshot thing. What I was actually saying is maybe it has the sort of I'm not even sure it would actually. I'm not really sure what I would necessarily compare it to. I think because it's simultaneously a very sad film and also a very angry film. So I mean, it reminds me of The Irishman in terms of its scope and length. But in terms of other films, I'm struggling to come up with one, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, you could, in terms of the role, there's a little bit of everything in there, because we even kind of like where religion comes into. You could even make a case for silence having some influence on this here. But I think it's kind of its own beast once you layer all these things in together. I was kind of surprised at how angry the film is about the treatment of the Osage and the role and basically the society that kind of led the likes of William Hale. I don't want to get into arguments about kind of like, is evil intrinsic in people and all this sort of thing, but like William Hale is definitely an evil man on the basis of the events of this film. I wasn't expecting the film to be quite so angry about the construction of society that leads him to act the way he does, right? The way that evil, if it is in him, the way that that's acted out, and how the systemic racism and white privilege leads him to act when there is this situation that kind of upends the whole thing, right? It's and don't get me wrong, there are horrific bursts of violence in this, like you'll find in any other Scorsese film. But the true horror here is really in the conversations, right? The casual way that people refer to it, and this sort of thing. It's so I'm struggling to find something that I would directly connect it to. But I think in terms of scope and timing, it is actually quite close to The Irishman in my view. But I think it deals with a lot more than The Irishman does. It's got broader themes. Like The Irishman, I think, is a much more internal film to kind of the character of Frank, but this one cuts across so many things.
Great. And that film is coming out very shortly. Do you know when exactly it's coming out?
It is coming out on Friday the 20th.
Friday the 20th. So, apart from these two big films, what other? I know you'll be talking about one in particular that's coming out in December. But what other films that did you see, or that really kind of struck you?
So I think the other two I'm going to mention are, so first of all, there were a couple of films that we've actually already spoke about in the show that played it at London. Girl, which we spoke about for the Glasgow Film Festival, and I think we all agreed that was a really excellent film that played here. Yep. In terms of other ones I saw a Chilean film called Pino Cordillera, which I'm going to bring up because it's quite an interesting one to talk about briefly in light of the fact that we just reviewed El Conde not so long ago. And basically what this film does, so that translates to Prison in the Andes, and it follows 5 high-ranking officials in the Chilean army under Pinochet who are now imprisoned in this kind of very luxurious prison, basically. But one of them gives a television interview. He's very unapologetic. He says that one of the guards is just there to hold his cane. And basically that's very poorly received. So their privileges start to get restricted. And it's how these arrogant, formerly powerful men react to that. And, their kind of relationship with the guards into this very claustrophobic kind of thriller, and I have no idea whether, I don't think it's slated for a UK release right now. I have no idea whether it will come out or not, but if it does, it's definitely worth checking out. And it's interesting because it does have this kind of like just slightly comedic edge, and it also looks at kind of the impact of Pinochet's regime on the Chilean psyche, I think, and what impact it has in lasting kind of societal trauma, if you like. And it was quite interesting to see it, actually, because I think that's something that El Conde looks to do, but it does it in a very different way, right? So I think that made for quite an interesting piece of viewing. Another film I saw, which I'm going to mention, which I do think will come out in the UK at some point. I don't think it's got a release date right now. The next place I know it's going to is Cambridge Film Festival, is Horde, which is the first film from a filmmaker called Lunacar Moon. And I honestly thought it was excellent. By the time this show is broadcast, I think I will have a written review of it live on takeonecinema.net. But really, I think it's an excellent film. It's not perfect by any means. It starts to kind of fray a bit at the edges, but basically what it focuses on is it opens in 1984 with a young girl, Maria, who is basically dumpster diving and raiding bins with her mother, Cynthia. And they go home, and it becomes apparent that Cynthia has a mental block and an obsessive compulsion that causes her to kind of hoard rubbish and basically just other things that people have thrown away in her own stuff. But her love for her daughter is very apparent and very clear. But this kind of first segment of the film culminates in Maria having to go and live with a foster mother. And we then jump forward 10 years to her now about to leave school. And two things happen, right? First of all, she gets an untimely reminder kind of her mother and her childhood, and kind of that starts to bring thoughts of it back and how she reacts to that. And also sexual tension with a former foster child of her foster mother's who's come home to visit, Michael, played by Joseph Quinn, and kind of the chemistry and the connection they have, which kind of starts to kind of like, it's kind of a coming of age type thing. But but honestly, this film it's bold in how disgusting it is at times, right? As you can imagine, with this idea of hoarding trash, there's a lot of imagery that it juxtaposes love against kind of like, rotting food, and kind of like familial affection against like putting your hand in a decomposing rat carcass and and it's fascinating the way that it plays these things off one another. And the performances across the board are great, but the older Maria, played by Sora Lightfeet Leon, is absolutely superb, right? It's a kind of total, to use a cliche, fearless performance, and she throws herself right into it. It's still a debut feature. I don't think it's perfect. I think once we get to the end, it starts to kind of dive off down rabbit holes in terms of her internal thoughts that maybe kind of make it start to flow less well. But it's really bold, and that kind of pairing of disgusting, visceral kind of imagery that gets a real kind of like reaction from you against these kind of like coming of age themes. And I may well have some people jumping down my throat for this, but it actually reminded me a lot of Raw, Julia Dorkenau's first film, right? And just in terms of the way the places it's unafraid to go to in juxtaposing kind of sexual tension with kind of sensory disgust and things like that, I thought it was an absolutely fascinating film, and I'm very interested to see where Lunacar Moon goes as a filmmaker after this. But that film in and of itself, on its own terms, I think is fascinating to watch, and I think the performances are like incredibly engaging.
So it sounds like there's a ton of great films happening right now in the London Film Festival as we're recording this, and more to be had. Those and one film that you both saw and be reviewing on this show is EILEEN, coming out, and believe at the beginning of December in the UK. Simon, tell us a little bit about this film.
Sure. So EILEEN is directed by William Oldroyd and based on a novel by Ottessa Moshfegh. It follows Eileen, who is played by Thomasin McKenzie, in kind of 1960s New England. Eileen works at a prison and looks after her father, who is an alcoholic ex-cop. And her life seems very small. She essentially just goes to the prison, buys gin for her father, is unhappy at home. Her life is somewhat upended when a glamorous new prison counselor arrives at the prison, played by Anne Hathaway. And they sort of come into contact and have this flirtatious, ambiguous relationship. I won't say much more about the film from there, but the kind of psychological thriller elements branch out from that point. And yeah, I would say it is heavily Hitchcock inspired. There's a very strong theme of influence of referencing Alfred Hitchcock's works, from the kind of period, old-timey Universal logo at the start with kind of film grain that you can actually see on the production logos as they come up, to the kind of misty setting of this New England town where they live, and the fact that it has Anne Hathaway playing a traditional Hitchcock blonde called Rebecca, of all things. So I liked it. I think it's a very weird film to talk about. It has a strange structure and a strange tone to it, but overall I would say I enjoyed it quite a bit. I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, I think I concur with that. It's there's a couple of moments in this. Well, there's a moment which we'll talk about obliquely in a minute, and aspects of this film that I think you probably need to go with to enjoy it, right? And in my case, I did, right? And I think the most effective thing for me, besides kind of just the general look and feel of the film, which Simon has put across really pretty well there, is Thomasin McKenzie, who plays EILEEN, right? Her performance, I think, is excellent. And she's an actor that I'm quite a big fan of ever since Leave No Trace, right, which was kind of the first time I came across her, and I think she's done a lot of good work, and she's also done some good work in some not so good films. But you know, she's superb, and I think the way that she carries herself, because she doesn't have a huge amount of dialogue. I mean, like, you know, it's not a silent film or anything like that, but you know,
no, but she's a very quiet, mousy kind of,
yeah, exactly, right.
woman.
So she's needing to put across a lot of EILEEN's character and frame of mind about kind of this small town, slightly banal setting she finds herself in with an abusive father, really. It needs to come across a lot in expressions and tone and body language, and I think she does that really superbly. So when Rebecca, Anne Hathaway's character, the new prison psychiatrist, comes into her life, you really, beyond kind of like Hathaway's screen presence, and like as Simon's put across, like she's also meant to kind of like pop out from the screen in comparison to the other characters, right? Just in the way that she dresses, the hairstyle, the way that she handles a cigarette, like all the confidence with which she speaks, she's meant to pop out. But I think you really get across the way that kind of just kind of awakens EILEEN and makes her just more interested in herself, Rebecca, and the world in general. I think Thomasin McKenzie's performance there is great. I think another thing to put across with that is also the costuming, right? So in terms of how EILEEN dresses before and after, and she starts wearing her deceased mother's like fur coats and things like that, and embraces these things that Rebecca likes, like cigarettes and things like that. It's just overall, it's a really good performance. I think how you come away from this film feeling probably depends a little bit on how you feel about the direction the film goes in after a certain point, right? So we build to this point, and there's quite a lot of, you know, tension between these two characters, and then the film kind of takes a slight tonal shift at one point, and it really depends on how well you go with that. I think now I went with it. I thought it was great. I really quite enjoyed it, and I think where the film goes after that point makes fantastic use of the way they've built EILEEN as a character to that point, right? And you like basically nothing. This tonal shift that I'm talking about, nothing it feels sudden and it feels shocking in the way it's meant to, right? I think everything that then follows after that doesn't feel inorganic, right? It all kind of feels a part of the character that you've kind of established to that point. So for me, it works. I can see how it might not for others. On a less narrative standpoint, I really like the look of the film. So this is shot by, so the director is William Oldroyd, who, this is the first film of his I've seen, but I think most folk will probably have come across him for Lady Macbeth, the Florence Pugh film from about 7 or 8 years ago now. And this is shot by Ari Wegner, who shot that film and a bunch of other ones. I think the one that she shot most recently would probably be familiar as The Power of the Dog, right? Which I also thought looked absolutely superb. So there's a lot to like about this film. I like the central performances. I like the way the boldness of the tonal shift it goes through. I think it looks great. Simon's right in the sense that it's a strange little film. The tone is very kind of unsettling and off kilter, right? But I think if you go with that and you go with the tonal shift, you'll get a lot out of this. There's a lot to like.
There's a very specific vibe to the film, and as you've said, the success of the film depends on how into that vibe you are. I think at a certain point, which you've alluded to. So I've read other reviews. I've read negative reviews, which seem to come down to not keying into that vibe, not getting it, quote unquote. And I've read letterboxd reviews, which essentially say, if you don't get it, you won't get it. Because I think there's something very specific at work here, a specific tone, a specific vibe. And I mentioned the Hitchcock influences. I think it treads the line very carefully between homage and parody. I think at certain points it almost feels like it's going to tip over the edge into parody of Hitchcock. And there were some lines that got laughs in my screening that I'm not sure the filmmaker intended to get laughs. But I think for me, it stayed on the right side of that line of homage and didn't leap over into a sense of ridiculousness. And I came out thinking of Paul Feig's film, A Simple Favor, which, if you've seen it, becomes a very ridiculous film and is also about the intertwining of two women kind of psychologically and quasi-sexually. And so that film leapt over the edge of ridiculousness in a way that this doesn't, but threatens to,
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think something that I find interesting about the kind of the Hitchcock analogies is this: it does find time to make itself its own beast as well, and I think this is also part of how well you go with it, right? Because it's certainly not the first film to have done this, and it won't be the last. But one thing that's quite striking about it is the way that Eileen's dissatisfaction with her kind of general situation plays out. Is we get quite a lot of segments which basically violently depict like acts of violence or self-harm, which like are not shot any differently to the film itself. It's not at all obvious that that's what it is, before we kind of like basically smash cut back to reality, and basically you realize that it's a violent, intrusive thought on the part of Eileen, right? And this is another way in which it kind of gets subtly across her frame of mind. So in terms of kind of like it being a sort of thrillery setup, it does take time to sit with that character. It does it in ways that aren't just spelling it out, basically, right? And there's a lot that I liked about it in that regard, right? It kind of keeps you on edge, and part of that strange tone is delivered by things like that, right? This depiction of these violent, intrusive thoughts that she has, against either herself or her father, and things like that, right? So yeah, it's a very specific tone. And I think if you can sit with that and enjoy the performances and kind of sit with kind of like that lack of knowledge about where it's going, then you'll get a lot out of it. But if you don't, it maybe primes you a little bit less for that tonal shift that I've referred to. I've seen some people refer to it as a plot twist. I don't think it is a plot twist, right? I do think it's a. Personally, I find it to be a tonal shift, and there's enough of the film left that I think it then plays out kind of as logically as it can from that point, which is why I'm mentioning it. I don't really consider it a spoiler. The film kind of shifts gear, when it comes into its home straight. I don't think that should be of a surprise to anyone. But yeah, I personally think it sets up and executes that well because of the development of the tone that Simon's spoken about. But I can see how if you don't find yourself settling into that, then it does make it harder for that shift to land well, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a twist either. It's clearly a shift, but it is set up, and it's obvious throughout the film that this tension has to be building to something.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a point where I thought, this tension has been building for a while. I do hope something's going to happen soon. I hope the shoe drops soon. And it was shortly after that what we're alluding to actually happened. So I was quite pleased with how it managed that tension, which builds steadily and steadily and steadily and then explodes at a certain point.
Yeah. Mm.
Okay, great. Well, so thank you both for your take on the London Film Festival, and just curious what you're excited to see next. Not just the London Film Festival, but what's coming up. It's a big, lots of new films coming out.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see Killers of the Flower Moon, especially after hearing Jim talk about it.
Yeah.
But also, as I've said, I'm excited to see The Zone of Interest, new Jonathan Glazer film, which I think is out in December, maybe. I'm not sure. But yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, off the back of festival season, there's a lot of films I'm interested to see. So I mentioned a couple already, and Daniel Cocotalio and so Daniel Cocotalio's Star of Acre, and then Christos Niku's new film Fingernails. I'd be interested to see them. The Assistant I thought was an excellent film. So the Royal Hotel, Kitty Green's new film, I'd be very interested to see that. These are all films that are going to be coming out pretty soon. Killers of the Flower Moon, I might be tempted to go see it again, to be perfectly honest with you. And there's other films just coming out kind of, that I think are just going to be interesting to see. Those are the main ones that I can probably think of, but then there's smaller films like 20,000 Species of Bees, the David Fincher film, The Killer, that Simon mentioned, like that's going to be coming out. I'd be very interested to see that. Michael Fass, and we'll see why. I haven't read any reviews of that on any of its festival run, but the concept of pairing David Fincher and Michael Fassbender seems like a pretty good match to me. I think that could be a really kind of interesting film. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff at Cambridge Film Festival, which I'll be interested to see. So Simon reviews at Glasgow Film Festival, and I would quite like to see Typist, Artist, Pirate King, Carol Morley's new film. Just off the back of kind of like this run of festivals, from Cannes in May through to Venice last month and London this month. There's a lot of the films that were at that are now going to start coming to cinemas, and I think I'll be very keen to see a lot of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed that that Carol Morley's film is out after we reviewed it on the Glasgow Film Festival, and also just a shout out to Smoke Sauna Sisterhood that's going around the UK right now. We interviewed Anna Hintz last month, and the film is out in cinemas across the UK. And actually, Anna's doing a UK tour of Q&A as well. So very sort of exciting. So thank you again for joining us and for this London Film Festival coverage. But I really appreciate it, and see you soon. So I'm back, and I'm here with Paul Bruce and Jamie Robson as part of the Edinburgh Short Film Festival. Paul was our host for many years, and hopefully coming back to do some interviews in the future. But Paul, welcome back to the Cinetopia radio show and podcast. And congratulations on 13 years as head of Edinburgh Short Film Festival.
Hi, Amanda. Yeah, thanks for having us back. It's lovely to be here again. 13th edition. We're not superstitious at the Edinburgh Short Film Festival, he says, looking around for some wood to touch. But yeah, we're delighted to be screening again this year. It's runs from October 26th to November the 5th.
So tell me a little bit about the program this year. Quite a lot of films. You'll be screening over a course of 2 weekends, starting on the 26th. What do we have in store, and what should we look out for?
Yeah, that's right. We're screening 80 plus short films from every corner really of the world, and it's a jam-packed program. It's running kind of similar to previous years, so there's 6 in competition programs, including a lot of award winners from around the world, Scottish and UK-based films. There's a bunch of workshops and some curated programs from guest programmers. We've got some outstanding films this year. I'm really pleased to screen a really wonderful drama from Tibet, which I think did pretty well. We're also screening a lot of outstanding animation, including Belgian animation. There's an amazing stop motion from Estonia by Pretender, which very reminiscent of Jan's Vankmeijer, if your listeners are old enough to remember. And it also won the Best Animation Awards at the Tampere Film Festival. There's incredible experimental documentaries as well. There's one by a couple of Colombian filmmakers, which is amazing to look at. Very deep and profound story behind it. There's also Canadian animation, which is based on phonotropes, which is using record players to create moving images. Gosh, there's a whole range really. I could go on. Turkish documentary, there's Moroccan thrillers, there's Canadian drama, there's American indie cinema. So yeah, it's jam-packed really every night.
And one film you're screening is Archivia, which is done by a British filmmaker. And Jamie, you have been in quite a few films that have been at the Edinburgh Short Film Festival. Tell us about your experience being in the Edinburgh Short Film Festival, but also this film in particular, why you're excited to share that here.
Thanks. Yeah, the festival's been a great support throughout my career. And like you said, I've had a few films there over the years, and Charlotte Wells's film previous to Aftersun, Blue Christmas, which won the Best Scottish Short, I think, in 2018 maybe. So yeah, I've got a long history, and I just think it's a great event, and Paul does a fantastic job, and it's got a very broad spectrum of participants and films, and it does a really good job of supporting the industry. So yeah, Archivia's screening this year, which was by director Ross Wilson, who I've worked with before, and it's just it was a real adventure from beginning to end. It's privately funded, and we shot it on film, on celluloid, and he made it in a really interesting way. Sort of gathered footage in a sort of documentarian style, and then found the film really in post. And there's this use of archive footage and an incredible sound design, and the whole thing's just a sort of study of the Scottish landscape and ecology and environmental issues. But yeah, I'm very, very proud of it. It's one of my most proudest pieces to date, so it's great to see it at the festival.
Wonderful. And you've also part of another film that's in the festival as well, A90, correct?
Yes, so A90 is by Olivia Middleton, and it was shot by a really talented cinematographer called Leon Brioni, and I've worked again with Olivia before, so collaboration and re-collaboration is something that I'm proud of. I guess it's a good sign that things are very different. A90 is publicly funded, digital and colour, whereas obviously Archivia is black and white and shot in film. yeah, so a very different experience, but equally enjoyable, and another film that I'm proud of. And it's nice to have two very different types of film at the festival. This shows the festival's got such a wide spectrum and broad interest in different filmmakers and filmmaking. And I'm really excited to see Archivia on the big screen, particularly because of the visuals and the sound design and the score. It's going to be quite an experience.
Great. And so this is so apart from the various screenings and programs that are sort of put together at Summer Hall, you also have a bunch of other kinds of events related to. So over the years, you've really made Paul, you've made contact with connections with other short film festivals or other film festivals around the world, and you oftentimes the short film festival becomes a place where you just you bring other film directors. Can you talk a little bit about the other programs that you have on offer as part of this 13th edition?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, part of it really is to bring film makers, film people together to learn from each other and just to experience some of the different approaches taken, not just here, but, across Europe and so on. So we have European Film Festival night. We've been doing that since Brexit, actually, because it's also quite important to keep cultural links with mainland Europe, as we all know. But we've been doing that for years. This year, we're delighted to welcome the Budapest Short Film Festival, Shortcuts Amsterdam, FICBO, which is a Galician film festival, has been going for 16 years, and the Adriatic Film Festival. So they'll be screening some of their this year's 2022's best films from these festivals, and then afterwards we'll be holding a panel discussion with them, really just to explore the differences and also the similarities between filmmakers and film programmers across Europe. So that's on Saturday, November the 4th. We've also got a programme curated by the Belgian Short Film Commission. Belgium's really got an amazing background in commissioning short film. I don't know how many they do, but it must be hundreds. They've got three particular departments. There's one for Wallonia, one for Flanders and Brussels, and they produce outstanding shorts. They really put a lot of money and effort into creating excellence in the short film. So we're delighted to have a programme curated by the Belgian Short Film Commission, and that's on November the 3rd, Friday, November the 3rd. We've also got, so Archivia is going to be screening as part of our Scottish Shorts Night, which we're also co-curating with the GMAC in Glasgow, and that's going to be just exclusively Scottish Shorts. And that's on Saturday the 29th at Summer Hall, 7:30. And then we're doing masterclasses and workshops. There's a workshop on low-budget filmmaking. So there's a panel discussion, which will include Jamie, as well as people from GMAC. There'll be producers and directors, and we'll be discussing aspects of short film from location, budgeting, etc. That's free. Also, the two other free workshops we've got are a phone and tablet masterclass and a stop-motion workshop as well. Tickets for those available just now online. And then there's, of course, our opening night. We have, I think, Cinetopia guesting, haven't you? You're coming along, so we'll be lovely to see you again. That's part of our opening night, so you'll be doing networking during the night. We'll be doing the screening, so we'll pop in and out. It looks like being fun.
Yeah, thanks for the plug there. Cinetopia Networking is happening on the 26th. We'll start a little bit earlier than normal, and we'll continue on and let people go to the screenings and then come back. But it's always a good way to start the festival, and love to be connected with the Short Film Festival in lots of ways. Jamie, you mentioned that you're going to be part of a panel. You were part of a panel last year around budgeting and short films. Why do you think it's important that these festivals share kind of like insider knowledge and have these sort of events for people to learn about actual filmmaking?
Yeah, well, I think particularly in the UK, we don't necessarily have an infrastructure that exists in somewhere like the States or somewhere like Portugal. Both very different infrastructures for filmmakers, but both in a way more robust in the current setup here. And because finance is increasingly difficult, I think understanding the value and the process of low budget filmmaking is really, really important. And I think, the festival focuses on shorts, and we're going to talk about, shorts. We'll maybe touch upon low budget features as well, and internet series or television. But it's so important because the funding bodies and the opportunities to get public funding are limited, understandably. I think there's maybe 10 spaces each year in Scotland for a short film to be publicly funded, which means, there's a lot that leaves out a huge percentage of people who are going to have to look at alternatives, whether it's crowdfunding, private funding, and so on and so forth, or any sort of amalgamation of various ways. And just realizing that there is a way forward, that it's not the end if you don't get backed by a funding body or a public organisation, and that that's Paul's phone, don't worry, we'll leave that in for authenticity and a sign of gritty realism. So I mean, and I've had the experience of working with a short film made for £200, a short film for £2,000, a short film for £20,000, publicly funded shorts, privately funded shorts, ones that have gone to huge international festivals such as Sundance, and ones that haven't gotten to any festivals. So I do have a lot of experience to share. I'm really passionate about short films because my career really was founded on short films before I transitioned to features and television. And I think at the moment, because there's not really a culture for low budget features, which is a big issue that I'm really passionate about trying to change. I think shorts are an opportunity to make mistakes, trial and error in a safe environment before you're given the responsibility of a 6 million debut feature, if you're lucky enough to get there. Which is kind of ridiculous if you think about it, that people are expected to do 2 or 3 shorts and suddenly go into development for an 8 million feature. Whereas if there was a culture of, making more short films, building a bigger body of work, where you could really find your voice and develop that, and garner a lot more experience. I just think, short films are essential in the UK, and we could give them more attention and a bigger platform, and knowing how to do it on a budget is important because, like I said, money's scarce. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the panel. It was a good one last year, and I think anyone interested in filmmaking should come.
One of the things I really like about the Short Film Festival, it was the first festival I volunteered for when I first moved to Edinburgh, and have been part of it since then in lots of ways. And it's just how friendly of a festival it is, and how many I really applaud you giving lots of people great experiences, and met lots of friends through it. What drives you to run this festival for 13 years, and are there things that you take away every year that you really enjoy about the festival itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the big buzz is when you put a program on, everybody loves it. I think that's the same for anyone, any film programmer. That's really the excitement. It's also about meeting people, and then networking and socializing and making new friends, really. So those two things are the chief things I get out of it, I guess. It's always an honour and a privilege, really, to run Edinburgh Shorts. But yeah, when you get to it's also quite a lot of work. So yeah, it can be quite. At the same time, you've got the buzz, but at the same time, you're kind of like, well, I'm getting older, so exhausted, etc. Bandy-legged. So yeah, but no, it's wonderful. I really enjoy it. But those are the two main things, really. That's what I always look forward to, especially on opening night and closing night. But yeah, so a lot to look forward to, and the films themselves as well, because every year there are a number of standouts that you really want to see on a big screen with a decent sound system. So yeah, so that's, and obviously meeting you again.
Well, yeah, and Jamie, you've been at the Short Film Festival a few times, and have been involved with it. What do you think makes the Edinburgh Short Film Festival special?
Again, I think just the programming. I think the broad range of films, both Indigenous and international, and the Paul's got his own interest in animation, having had some success with animation in the past, and so that there's documentary, there's drama, there's animation, there's it's just a very diverse mix of programming, which makes it a very rich experience, and it's a great space for people who come that are veterans, have been in the industry for 10, 20 plus years and have won major awards, but it's in the same space there's new talent, new filmmakers, people that are looking at maybe first time, and I think that's a really exciting space that Paul creates, the festival creates, and it's got such a good reputation.
Quite competitive now. There's quite a lot of films, right? That you get a lot of submissions, don't you?
Yeah, quite a lot. Yeah, I was 1,700 this year, so I think if you get in, it's an achievement in itself. I mean, if you get into any festival, really, it's still a pretty big achievement. I think there's so many more people making shorts. It's easier to do so. In fact, it'll become even easier if you go to our phone and tablet masterclass. So you've got all these avenues now that people, and also you don't necessarily just go from short film to feature film. There's a lot of other different routes people can take now. So it's an expanding field, but it's excellence. I think also what systems are better, editing systems and so on. So the finished film usually is a higher standard now than it was 10 years ago. So there's all those factors I think have an influence on the number of films and the quality, etc., of the programming.
I would agree. Over the course of the past few years, I really think the actual quality level of the film making and the cinematography is exceptional. And having got to see quite a few for making the trailer, it's going to be some really beautiful films on screen and animations and all different kinds of films. So the Edinburgh Short Film Festival, 13th edition, 26th of October to the 5th of November. And we will be there on the 26th. We'll be there more days than the 26th. Definitely on the 26th. Come to Cinetopia Networking and the opening night of the Edinburgh Short Film Festival. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having it. Also, if you want to see Jamie, he's appearing in A90 on Thursday the 26th of October, and Archivia screens on Saturday the 29th.
Thank you very much. I'll see you there. Thank you.